Whereas social psychology focuses mainly on the thoughts and actions of the average person from a given group, personality psychology focuses mainly on what makes each individual unique. For example, social psychologists focus on the fact that most people will go all the way up to 450 volts in the Milgram experiment, whereas personality psychologists focus on the psychological differences between people who go up to 450 volts and people who don't. Personality psychologists have found greater obedience among people who tend toward an authoritarian view and lack what's called social intelligence. Personality psychologists usually like to think of personality as having several continuous dimensions rather than being defined by discrete categories. A given person's personality can be at least roughly defined by where they fall along these dimensions. It can be challenging to determine exactly where a person falls along these dimensions. We can't just ask someone how conscientious they are. Instead, personality psychologists combine many clues from self-reports, reports from informants such as friends and parents, direct observation of behavior, and assessment of life outcome data from archival sources such as birth and death records. Each of these sources has advantages and drawbacks, with self-report measures being the easiest and most common. Self-report measures don't directly ask the person where they fall along a given dimension. Instead, they ask a variety of questions that are related to different degrees with different dimensions of personality. For example, people who rate themselves high in the statements, "I am always prepared" and "I get chores done right away," are probably high in conscientiousness. And people who rate themselves high in the statements, "I believe in the importance of art" and "I enjoy hearing new ideas," are probably high in openness to experience. By using statistical techniques such as factor analysis to examine correlations between answers to these different questions, personality psychologists can identify the main dimensions of personality. They can then see whether these questionnaire measures are related to how a person acts in daily life. For example, people who give a high rating to questions like number 2 and number 8 usually travel more and eat a broader range of foods than people who score low on these statements. Most personality psychologists now agree that there are 5 main dimensions of personality, which are called the Big Five. These dimensions are usually called openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. You can use the mnemonic OCEAN to remember these names. The dimension of extroversion is easy to misunderstand. Being extroverted is not necessarily the same thing as being interested in people. An introverted person might care deeply about people and have some very close friends. Extroversion is more about energy levels and need for external stimulation. People who score high in extroversion tend to have a lot of energy, but they also need to have a lot of stimulation to maintain that energy level. People who score low on extroversion tend to get overstimulated easily, so they prefer a lower stimulation environment most of the time. Neuroticism is also easy to misunderstand. Personally, I prefer the term emotional instability for this dimension. People who score high in neuroticism tend to react more to stress and negative events, whereas people who score low on neuroticism tend to remain calm under stressful conditions. Although there's a lot of agreement about the Big Five personality dimensions, this doesn't mean that someone's personality can be entirely described with these 5 dimensions. There are other dimensions as well. One of these is authoritarianism, which is associated with a higher probability of going all the way to 450 volts in the Milgram experiment. Another interesting dimension of personality is self-monitoring. This is a tendency for someone to adjust their behavior to the situation. Someone who's high in self-monitoring would be very serious and studious in a classroom, but might act wild and crazy at a house party. Someone who's low in self-monitoring would tend to act the same way, independent of the situation.